Hey guys, I'm Amaroth and welcome to WoW Theory number 2, Client Side. An introduction to client. Game client uses multiple different files. Among the most important are cache folder, errors folder, interface folder, Realmlist.wtf file, config.wtf file, and WTF folder. There are also MPQ files which will be very important for us. Cache folder. Cache folder stores data downloaded from database to prevent need of re-downloading them every time. An example would be an NPC name. When player encounters an NPC his cache database doesn't contain yet, his client will request NPC's name from the server. If an NPC is already in cache database, game client will use its already known name and it won't download that name again from server. This might be an unwanted behavior, as player's game client is storing possibly outdated data, for example names of NPCs. If any data already stored in someone's cache folder is changed on server side, it won't get automatically updated on client side. The only solution to this is deleting a cache folder. WoW will start building a new one afterwards, with up-to-date data. Errors. If your game client crashes, it most of times generates a WoW error. In those cases, WoW error files are always saved in error folders. .txt files can be useful as backups for your old errors, so you can share error messages with other developers in search for a solution. Those .txt files are automatically saved in your errors folder every single time WoW error is generated. The most important part is a header of an error, which can be found between error and WoW build statements. Example follows. This is an example of error header. The most important part is that which start with exception. You can see a code of error there, 76FD4458. You can try to download these codes, and quite commonly you can find them in frequently asked questions or on some sort of help forums and so on. Some error codes are simply well known. Interface folder contains addons folder, and this folder can be used for placing folders with your addons. You can find tutorials how to create addons online, just use fucking Google. I can't help you with this, I have never created any custom addon whatsoever. As far as I know, there is no way to force players to use addons, although there is a way to force them to download them by using a custom launcher. There is a way how to force them to use addons though, but you need to have a customized game client. You can't use default game clients WoW.exe. Realmlist WTF. Knowing how Realmlist works can sometimes make your life a lot easier. Realmlist WTF can be found in your locale folder, for example data and GB. Realmlist WTF determines server IP and port. It's more smart system than you probably know. If you enter multiple set Realmlist statements, only the last one is being used. Hashtag symbols mark comments. You can comment your statements in Realmlist and you can also delete them basically, but still keep them by commenting them. Multiple odd servers or Realm servers can run on one IP. In such case, you can and even need to specify port your Realm server is running on as well. Example of a little bit more complicated Realmlist WTF. This is a simple set Realmlist statement, but as you can see, there is also a port specified that is only optional, that part behind w. And you can see also hashtag public server. That's just a comment and will be ignored. It's just for you to mark that this IP is an IP of your public server. And this is a little bit more complicated. Realmlist, you can see two set Realmlist statements. They are to the same IP but to different port. So there are two out servers running on one IP. And just notice that there are two set Realmlist statements, but this Realmlist will work and it will use the second one. You can also add the third one, set Realmlist and 127.0.0.1, that's an IP of local server. And you can also add another set Realmlist which is commented and this will be ignored. So this Realmlist consisting of 4 set Realmlist statements will use the third one. So by using these tricks, you can make quite a complex Realmlist, and you don't need to always search for IP addresses of your servers and so on. You can have them in one file and just change order in which they are, or command those which aren't to be used right now. Config.wtf file can be found in WTF folder, and it stores your personal settings, your personal graphical settings, I should add. It also stores default realm to log into. This can cause problems if realm suddenly gets locked for your account level. For example, if realm was accessible previously, but then owner of that realm changed needed GM level to level you don't have. Deleting config WTF resets WoW to default settings. This might be useful, especially if you get kinda fucked up by the fact that owner of some realm has changed access GM level, because in such case World of Warcraft will simply kick you from the server, and it won't really give you possibility to connect to different realm, even if there are different realms. WTF folder, apart from containing config WTF file, it also contains account folder, and that account folder contains multiple folders for every single account which has ever logged in by using this client. Uh, every single account name folder contains account-wide settings, for example, keybinds or interface settings. That account name folder also contains folders with real names. Those folders contain realm-specific account settings. Do not rename your realm. If you do so, users will lose their add-on settings. However, they can restore those settings by copying them from outdated folder into a new up-to-date folder. So if you rename your realm, you can also just use your old add-on settings for your new realm by using this knowledge. Or you can use add-on settings from one realm and copy those settings to different realms. So you don't have to set your add-ons in every single realm by hand. MPQs, those are the most important files in World of Warcraft for us. They are simply archives similar to 7Z or RAR. They are basically just file compressing archives. Most of data used by game client is stored in MPQ. We will focus nearly exclusively on modding MPQ content. General MPQs are in data folder, and local MPQs are in data locale folder, for example NUS, NGB, RU folder, and so on. MPQs store various data files: map files, models, textures, DBC tables, user interface files, and sounds. Map files. Map files are, for example, ADTs. Each ADT file contains a tile of map which is approximately half of a kilometer mod half of a kilometer big square. ADT files contain information about terrain, water, terrain texturation, spawned models, zones and areas, etc. WDT files. Each map is made of 64 mod 64 tiles. However, WDT determines which of those possible tiles are really used. WDT can also set map to be made of one WMO model only. This is used for some instances, for example for raids. If some raid or some dungeon is made of one cave only, it is only one WMO model, that's the whole map. It will be set in this WDT file, and there will be no ADT files. In all other cases, if a map is some sort of continent, it will have ADT files. WDL file is only optional, at least on Wrath of the Lich King. It isn't optional on some newer expansions. It is used for rendering horizon based on terrain, which is behind rendering distance. WDEL files are useful because max rendering distance in Wrath of the Lich King is only about 1000 yards, and that's quite a small distance. So if you have some sort of huge mountain and it just suddenly pops out of fog, it just looks stupid. So it's good to have an up-to-date WDL file for managing this horizon. Model files. There are empty model files. Most of models in-game are in MP2 format. Animations are supported by MTUs. MTUs can contain light and particle effects. MTUs are poorly supported by server-side maps for though. When it comes to WMO files, they are a little bit different. They are always consisted of at least two files, one root file and one group file. Root files are just root files, which reference to another files, and group files are uh, different parts of WMO. They can be outdoor or indoor. There's always at least one the group file, which is usually an outdoor file, but there can be even multiple indoor files, and those would be usually rooms. WMOs can contain area and zone definitions, unlike MTUs. They can be bigger and much more complex. For example, they can be even a whole city. Uh, Stormwind, Ogrimmar, or Dalaran, they are all just one huge WMO. There are some limitations to WMOs though. They can't have animations. You can see animated parts on WMOs, but those are always empty models in fact. They also can't be scaled. You can't change scale of WMO model. They can contain choosable premade doodat sets that can't be achieved in empty models. So you can have one building, and the building has multiple doodat sets in it, and when you spawn that building, you can choose which doodat set is to be used. So you don't have to always spawn doodats into every single WMO. WMOs have also much better optimization, so in optimal case you get only that content rendered which you can see. So if you can't see into WMO's indoor parts, they aren't getting rendered for you and they don't slow your performance down. If you are in indoors of a WMO, you don't get rendered outdoor parts of WMO and you don't get rendered WMO surroundings, which again speeds up your performance a lot. WMOs are also well supported by server-side maps, which means that NPCs don't fall into WMOs, they can pass over them and so on. This can't be said about MTUs, and you can always achieve that NPCs go around MTUs, but they won't be able to go over them. They are also scanner files and they are just for MTUs. MTU can have up to 4 different scanning files and they are used for LOD support. You don't need to really know what is it because we don't have tools for creating skin files. There just needs to be one default skin file and that's it. There are also anim files which are for animations, but again, you don't need to really bother with them at all, at least unless you want to edit character models. Textures. World of Warcraft basically use only one format for textures and that's BLP. It can use TGA, at least in some cases, as far as I know, but it's not preferred way. You can find only BLPs in Biz-like game client. DBCs. DBC files are client database files, although they are being used by server as well. Each DBC file is essentially one table. DBC files contain definitions of spells, creature, item or game object display IDs, sound IDs, zone area IDs, maps, etc. Client uses DBC files for visual purposes. What should description of spell look like, or what should spell's effect look like, but they don't determine how high damage should be done by spell. They can determine what damage should be displayed in a spell's description, but spell will deal such damage only if the same damage is on server side. More about that when we get to server side in the third part. Interface. Interface is made of two files or of two formats of files, Lua and XML files. XML files contain information about UI layout, so what should be there, what should be, for example, a button. Lua files contain interface scripts, the code behind. So if you click on a button, what should happen? That's Lua scripting. By the way, Lua scripting is used by macros as well. sounds. WAV files are used for sound effects, usually. MP3 files are usually used for zone music. OGG files are usually used for ambient sounds, but it isn't essential. You can find those formats mixed in different usage. And that's pretty much all what you can find in Game Client. Thank you for watching. I hope this was useful for you. Have a nice day and happy modding.